Okay, guys, here we go. So we're going to wrap it up. So what do we want to do to finish this up? Well, we definitely don't want to pick a color that we've already used for our background, but we need to do something. So I'm kind of leaning towards sort of a blue, navy blue sort of deal. You definitely want to pick a color that you can create a shadow with. So like I would say yellows are off the table, reds and pinks are off the table, browns are off the table. Because even if you like wanted to put it on like a wood butcher block, I just think we would lose a lot of the detail and texturing from your color of your donuts. Okay, so maybe, you know, you could use grays and blacks, you could use purples, greens even, but don't do anything super, super bright. I'm going to stay kind of on the muted end. So I'm going to grab my darkest blue, and I'm going to grab a lighter one too. Maybe 3 different blues so that I kind of have this option. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in my shadows first because these are super important to make sure that we have done. So I'm going to go around all the bases of my donuts. Now instantly I'm thinking, oh boy, I thought this blue was a little darker. So what I can do is I can go in and grab a different color. I'm going to try to avoid using black. I'm going to go and grab, I have a really dark green. And I'm going to overlap that. There, I like that a little better. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for all of my donuts. And that's going to be step 1. So again, I'm using whatever my darkest color that I'm choosing, and then if it doesn't quite feel dark enough to you, grab another color and another darker color and sort of blend that together. As you go. All right, I'm going to use the power of video magic, and we're going to fast forward. Okay, so I went around and I remembered to go under the custard over here. I filled in the hole, but in this hole here, I actually mixed it with brown because I thought about it, and you wouldn't really probably see to the blue table, so it would probably be more of a shadow from the donut below. So I did more of a brown in the hole there, and then I even went a little bit around some of my crumbs with a little bit of blue and a little bit of that green to kind of go around all those shadows to make it a little bit darker. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with that blue that I started with that I thought was going to be dark enough. And I'm going to go ahead and just start putting in the next layer out. So just like we did with our donuts, I'm working dark to light and making sure that our shadows and cast shadows are represented well. So I'm even starting to blend a little bit out from where that darkest area was. I've got to be careful around my crumbs in this zone over here so I don't lose them. So I'm going to do this all over. And then I'm going to take my like middle blue value and use that as pretty much the remainder of my background. And that's what I will kind of do our last little bit of blending with. So remember, you don't want your shading and your shadows to be perfect. You definitely want the darkest area to be right underneath the donut, and then work your way out. And then I'm going to take that next blue that I wanted to use. We'll see, this blue's even a little darker. So I might actually, I found a blue that's looks lighter, but is actually darker. And this is when you should yell at Mrs. Vance and say, Mrs. Vance, you should have tested that first. And you're right, I should have. I should totally have tested my colors and that's what I'd like you to do. So take a piece of scratch paper and, you know, test out the blues that you're considering using, because you might be surprised that one that looks darker might actually be a brighter pigment. So it just sort of depends. So I'm taking this opportunity to go back and blend a little bit more. Okay, so now that I've done that, now I need to decide how bright do I want to go. I'm going to grab, I have a couple different other blues, so I'm going to test them. That one's too purpley. That one's better. All right, I think I found the blue I'm going to use then. So that way, I'm basically coloring everything else. Now, because there's very little blending to do in the rest of the background area, I'm pressing pretty hard, and I'm keeping my strokes all kind of this way, left to right, right to left, so that it represents more of that sort of flat surface of a table. And I am going to sort of trace around my donuts to make sure I get that sharp, clean edge, but I don't accidentally like blend blue into my chocolate or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the magic of video editing to pause, fast forward, and then catch you back up towards the end here. One thing I wanted to share with you really quick is, as I was coloring around this stack of donuts, remember that your shadow, your shading, really is just going to be on this, this back end down here. It's not going to be on the sides. Like, think about how things like sit on tables, right? They, you only see shadows on the actual surface, not necessarily on the side. So we want to make sure that our lighting stays the same the whole way. And then the other thing you're going to notice is that whatever main color you choose to fill the rest of your background, you're going to use a lot of that oil pastel, like maybe even half of it. So don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to peel it. It's okay, but we want it to be that nice solid surface. We don't want the paper to show through. So remember, I'm carefully tracing around a donut, almost like a barrier for myself as I go and do my horizontal coloring. So making sure I still keep the rest of my coloring left to right. Oil pastels, you can see the marks. So if you all of a sudden switch to up and down, it will be very apparent and it just will look a little sloppier than it needs to. All right, I'll catch you back up at the end. Okay, so I am wrapping up my coloring. But if you notice, there are still some areas that have white showing through, and I'm not loving it. So I am going to kind of go back after I get this last area colored. And I'm going to just go and kind of clean up any shadows and try to figure out how I can either take another color or go back with the same color and kind of blend in some of those zones. I mean, it looks great. I'm really proud of my donuts. This is the first time I've done this, but there is some things that I would love to go kind of touch up. So I'm going to go back in, taking that green value, then I'm going in with that blue, that darker blue, and sort of breaking it up. So I'm going to use that darker blue to kind of extend the shadows a little bit and blend them in a little bit more too. So this is going to help in some of these in-between areas. Here, definitely inside here. And this shadow for sure. Okay, so now I'm gonna decide, like, all right, do I grab, you know, one more blue? I'm gonna test it first. I don't know, it's sort of risky to take a different blue and to try to blend things in. I'm not super feeling it. I just barely touched it to the paper. So I'm gonna just go back and kind of work a second coat on those areas. And I'm gonna use more of a circular pattern when I'm coloring to try to get in those cracks. Because a lot of times it's the texture of the paper that's resisting that oil pastel from getting into those little areas. Now, do I expect you to get every little tiny white speck covered? No, I don't. But if there's any, you know, again, we don't want it to look crayon-like. And I think you know what I mean by that. We don't want it to look see-through to the paper. And we want it to look a nice, solid surface for our donuts to rest on. So again, I chose blue, but you could choose greens, purples, grays and blacks. It's really up to you. You could even try orange if you really loved orange. I'm not so sure it would go too well, but you could test it too. You could grab your sketchbook and test it on the page that you practiced your donuts with and see if you like that background color around the dough colors, etc. All right, so just kind of work your way around your project. Just make sure that you feel like it is 100% finished. And then I, of course, forgot, but I should grab my black oil pastel before it gets too crazy. And I'm going to put in my initials. And typically an artist signs in the bottom right-hand corner. So I'm going to make sure that my initials get thrown in the corner so I know that is mine. I'm really proud of this. I hope you guys had a great time with this. Enjoy wrapping up your lifelike donuts.